The math said he should be dead. Fuel, altitude, ammunition, distance, none of it favored him. By the end of the day, history would say otherwise. The morning of 15 August 1943 began clear over New Guinea, the sky rinsed pale blue by overnight rain. Below, the coastline near WWII cut a jagged line between jungle and sea. Japanese airfields were hidden inland, carved from mud and palm. They had been active all week. At 6:32 hours, a single Republic, Thunderbolt leveled off at 18,000 feet, engine steady at 2,550 RPM. The aircraft carried 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 425 rounds per gun. Just under 5 minutes of fire if used continuously, less if panic crept in. The pilot did the math without thinking about it. He was alone. The rest of his flight had turned back 10 minutes earlier after a radio fault. Doctrine said he should have followed. He didn't. The weather was good, fuel was still within margin, and intelligence reported fighters on the ground at WWII. The Thunderbolt's fuselage bore a chalked nickname on the left side of the cowling. Ground crew humor, gallows humor, they called it meat chopper. The aircraft was heavy, over 10,000 pounds empty, nearly 15,000 loaded, radial engine, big wings. It was not built for tight turns. It was built to absorb damage and dive fast. That was the theory. At 6:41, the first warning came through the canopy glass. Movement high 2 o'clock. 5 specks detached from the sun. Japanese Army fighters climbing hard. The silhouettes were resolved quickly. Ki-43 Hayabuses, known to Allied pilots as Oscars. Light, maneuverable, 2 12.7 machine guns each. No armor to speak of, deadly in a turning fight. 5 against 1. The pilot pushed the nose down slightly and checked manifold pressure. 52 inches. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 responded with a deeper growl. Speed crept past 280 knots. He did not turn toward them. He did not turn away. He held a course. At 6:43, the Oscars split. 2 dropped low, 3 stayed high, classic pincer. The Thunderbolt's canopy is filled with glinting wings. The first tracers came from above, thin white lines cutting air. They passed wide. The Japanese pilots were closing too fast, misjudging the P-47's speed in the shallow dive. The pilot waited. Altitude ticked down. 17500, 17,200. At 300 yards, he pulled the trigger. The Thunderbolt shuddered as all 8 guns fired. The sound was not a rattle. It was a tearing sound, continuous, metallic. Spent casings streamed back along the wings. The first burst lasted 1 second. He aimed not at the aircraft, but ahead of it. The lead Oscar flew into the stream. Pieces came off the right wing. The aircraft snapped sideways and fell away, spinning. No confirmation, no time. The second Oscar flashed across the nose, too fast. The pilot rolled right, heavy ailerons fighting him. The Thunderbolt did not like this. The Japanese fighter did. Rounds struck the P-47's left wing root. The cockpit filled with the smell of burned cordite and oil mist. Warning lights stayed dark. That mattered. He pushed the nose down again. The Thunderbolt accelerated past 350 knots. The Oscars followed, but the distance stretched. Their engines strained. The pilot could hear it even through his own, thin, high-pitched, desperate. At 10,000 feet, he pulled up into a climbing turn. Not tight, controlled, bleeding speed slowly, the Thunderbolt groaned. The Oscars overshot. This was the trade. Speed for position. Altitude for time. In 6:46, the fight had descended over a jungle broken by rivers and smoke columns from earlier raids. There was no friendly cover, no flak, no radio call for help. The pilot's mouth was dry. His right leg trembled against the rudder pedal. He still forced it. A glance at the ammo counters. Rough estimate, 3 guns already below 350 rounds. He had fired less than 10 seconds total. The Japanese pilots regrouped. They circled out of range, studying him now. They had learned something. He was not running. The Thunderbolt leveled at 7,500 feet, engine still pulling strong. Oil pressure is steady. No fuel leak visible. Control response sluggish but intact. The pilot flexed his left hand. It hurt. He hadn't noticed when it happened. Adrenaline covered it. The sky went quiet. 30 seconds, then 40. The next attack came from dead astern. Tracers stitched toward the tail. The Thunderbolt shuddered again, control cables held. The pilot rolled left, then right, forcing the attacker to correct. He counted silently. 1 second, 2. He snapped the nose up and kicked the rudder. The Oscar flashed into view, crossing low. He fired a short burst. The Japanese fighter's engine cowling erupted in white smoke. The aircraft rolled inverted and vanished into the green below. The pilot did not cheer. He exhaled once sharply. At 6:49, 4 Oscars remained. Fuel was now the problem. The Thunderbolt had burned more than planned in the dives. The math shifted again. Distance back to base, headwinds, reserve margins shrinking. He could disengage now. He knew that. He also knew the Oscars would follow until he committed fully. He set his jaw and eased the throttle forward. The Thunderbolt turned back toward WWII, climbing slowly, deliberately, inviting them to follow. They did. Above the jungle, with the sun climbing and the engine's heat soaking through the cockpit, the fight reset itself. And the real pressure began. At 6:52 hours, the Thunderbolt climbed through 9,000 feet, airspeed bleeding down to 240 knots. The engine temperature crept upward. Cowl flaps were already cracked open, adding drag he couldn't afford. He watched the needle anyway. An overheated engine would end this faster than bullets. The 4 remaining Oscars spread out again. Wider this time. Smarter. They stayed just outside gun range, forcing him to keep turning his head, forcing his neck to burn, forcing mistakes. No radio chatter, no warning, just the faint glimmer of wings against the sun. The pilot adjusted the trim with 2 fingers. The aircraft wanted to wallow at this speed. He corrected constantly, small inputs, discipline. At 6:54, 1 Oscar dove straight down from above, trading altitude for speed. Another came in from the low left. The 2 remaining stayed high, waiting. The Thunderbolt shook as rounds struck the fuselage. A metallic thud through the seat. Something punched through the right wing. The aircraft yawed slightly, then steadied. He didn't look for the damage. He couldn't. He rolled into the low attacker first. The Thunderbolt was already losing the turn. He knew it. He fired anyway, a half-second burst, forcing the Oscar to break. The Japanese fighter snapped upward, climbing like a leaf on a gust. Too fast. The high attacker came in next. Tracers passed inches above the canopy. Plexiglass crazed but held. The pilot ducked reflexively, then cursed himself for it. He shoved the stick forward and dove again. Altitude unwound rapidly, 8,000, 7,000. The Thunderbolt accelerated. The engine roared. The sound filled his skull, crowding out everything else. He felt the familiar pressure in his chest as gravity built. At 400 knots, the P-47 was finally in its element. The Oscars tried to follow. 2 did. 2 peeled off, unable to keep up. This was the window. The pilot pulled into a shallow climb and rolled inverted. The maneuver was slow, heavy, but it worked. 1 Oscar slid across his gun sight. He fired. The burst lasted 1.5 seconds. The Japanese fighter disintegrated forward of the cockpit. Wing fragments sheared away. The fuselage snapped, folding in on itself. It fell in pieces. 3. He didn't track the wreckage. He was already rolling again. Rounds hit the Thunderbolt's tail. The rudder pedal went soft under his right foot. Partial control loss, not total. He tested it gently. Response was sluggish but present. He adjusted. The Thunderbolt climbed back to 6,500 feet, slower now. The fuel gauge was edging lower than he liked. He ran the numbers again, unwillingly this time. At this burn rate, he had minutes, not margin. The Japanese pilots sensed it. They stopped pressing individually. They began to alternate attacks. One forced him to dive. Another hit him as he climbed. Then they reset. Each pass cost him altitude. Each climb cost him speed. Each dive cost him fuel. Sweat pooled in his gloves. His jaw ached from clenching. His breathing came short, measured, forced. He counted seconds between attacks to keep from thinking too far ahead. At 6:59, a burst struck the engine cowling. Oil sprayed across the windscreen in a sudden sheet, instantly blinding. The engine coughed once. The pilot reacted without hesitation. He kicked the rudder and rolled, pulling the nose down. Gravity cleared part of the oil away, leaving streaks and gaps. Visibility returned in fragments. Oil pressure dropped but stabilized. The engine was wounded, not dead. He wiped the inside of the canopy with his sleeve. It did nothing. 2 Oscars crossed high, one dropped low. He couldn't see them all at once now. The low attacker came in fast. The pilot fired blind through a smear of oil and sunlight. He saw strikes along the wing. The Oscar rolled away trailing vapor, fuel or coolant. It vanished into cloud shadow. 2. The Thunderbolt shuddered again. A loud crack echoed through the airframe, something structural. He tested the stick. Left aileron response was reduced, not gone, reduced. He adjusted his fighting space accordingly. No more hard rolls left. Right side only, vertical moves favored. At 7:02, the remaining 2 Oscars coordinated perfectly. One came straight in, guns blazing. The other waited, offset, ready to rake him as he evaded. The pilot chose the one in front. He held fire until the last possible moment. At 200 yards, he fired a concentrated burst. All guns. The recoil felt different now, uneven. 2 guns had likely jammed or been knocked out. It was enough. Oscar's nose vanished in a cloud of debris. The aircraft flipped end over end and fell. 1. The last Japanese fighter broke away immediately, climbing hard. No hesitation, no pursuit attempt. It knew the odds had flipped. The Thunderbolt did not chase. The pilot eased back on the throttle. The engine protested but held. Oil pressure was low. The temperature is high. He pointed the aircraft south toward home. At 7:05, the sky finally emptied. Silence returned, broken only by the engine's uneven thunder and the whistle of air through damaged panels. The pilot slumped slightly in his seat. Not relief, not yet, just fatigue arriving all at once. Fuel was critical now. He leaned the mixture carefully, watching the engine respond. Too much and it would quit, too little and it would overheat. Below, the jungle slid past, indifferent. The Thunderbolt limped on, carrying its scars, carrying its pilot, carrying the weight of minutes that had stretched into something much heavier. Behind him, the fight was over. Ahead of him, survival was still uncertain. The Thunderbolt stayed airborne by discipline alone. By 7:12 hours, the aircraft had descended to 3,500 feet, well below preferred cruising altitude. The engine ran rough now. Oil streaks continued to crawl across the windscreen despite airflow. Cylinder head temperatures hovered near the red line. The pilot kept his left hand on the throttle, ready to pull it back at the first sign of seizure. The cockpit smelled of hot oil and cordite. He flexed his feet. The right rudder pedal still responded, though with slack. The left aileron lagged badly. He compensated with trim and rudder pressure, flying the aircraft slightly crooked to keep it level. Fuel was down to the final third of the main tank. The Thunderbolt crossed the coastline south of WWII, heading over open water. This is the most dangerous phase now. If the engine failed, there would be no jungle to crash into, only sea. The P-47 was not built to ditch well. Its weight would pull it under fast. At 7:18, the engine misfired again, once, then steadied. He reduced power by another inch of manifold pressure. Airspeed dropped to 190 knots, barely enough to stay safe. The pilot checked his watch. Time mattered now. Every minute airborne increased the odds of total failure. At 7:24, a friendly coastline finally appeared through the oil-smeared glass. Low hills, familiar river bends. He keyed the radio, static, then a weak response. Thunderbolt, say again. He forced his voice steady, gave his call sign, his position, his condition. The reply came clipped and calm. The runway was clear. Emergency crews standing by. The pilot lowered the landing gear early. The mechanism groaned, then locked. He did not trust it to work a second time. At 7:31, the Thunderbolt lined up with the strip. He brought the aircraft in fast. No flaps, too risky. The engine coughed again at 50 feet, then held. The wheels hit hard. The right tire blew instantly. The aircraft veered. He rode the rudder, fighting asymmetrical drag until the Thunderbolt ground to a stop in a cloud of dust and smoke. The engine died on its own. Silence followed. The pilot stayed seated for several seconds after the propeller stopped turning. His hands shook now, not violently, just enough to notice. Ground crew reached the aircraft first. They stared at the damage before they spoke. Holes stitched the wings and fuselage. The cowling was torn. Oil dripped steadily onto the tarmac. The tail showed clear structural damage. A crew chief counted the hits later. More than 30 bullet strikes. 2 control cables partially severed. 1 machine gun was destroyed outright. Another jammed with a spent casing crushed inside the receiver. The pilot climbed down without help. Only then did the pain register fully. His left hand was bruised and swollen from striking the canopy frame during evasive maneuvers. His neck was stiff, muscles locked from constant scanning. His throat burned from dry breathing. Intelligence officers debriefed him that afternoon. 5 enemy fighters, confirmed kills, 4 destroyed, 1 damaged, likely lost. The engagement duration, approximately 22 minutes. They asked him why he stayed. He answered simply, "Because they stayed." Maintenance crews worked through the night. The Thunderbolt would not fly again for weeks. The engine had to be replaced. Structural repairs were extensive. One mechanic later remarked that the aircraft looked like it had flown through a wire fence at full speed. The nickname stuck after that day. Meat Chopper. Not officially, never in reports, but pilots knew which aircraft it meant. The Japanese unit based near WWII logged heavy losses that week. Their fighter strength thinned noticeably. Replacement pilots arrived with fewer hours, less confidence. Encounters with lone Thunderbolts became cautious, then rare. The pilot flew again after recovery. He never sought attention for the fight. It was logged, filed, absorbed into operational records like thousands of other engagements across the Pacific. But among pilots, the story circulated quietly. 5 fighters, 1 Thunderbolt, no escort. Survived. This fight did not change the course of the war. It did not alter strategy. It did not appear in headlines. What it demonstrated, clearly, mechanically, without romance, was the evolving reality of air combat in 1943. Speed mattered more than turning. Firepower outweighed agility. Durability could decide outcomes where skill alone once ruled. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved it could absorb punishment, disengage at will, and deliver overwhelming firepower in seconds. Japanese fighters, designed for early war doctrine, struggled to adapt. And one pilot, alone over New Guinea, demonstrated that doctrine is ultimately tested not on paper, but in minutes under pressure, with fuel burning and metal tearing apart at hundreds of miles per hour. The math said he should be dead. History recorded that he was. And then it moved on.